It's never any fun not being able to go to sleep, just like it wasn't any fun watching Last of Us Season 2. So, in the show, Ellie still looks exactly the same, but is supposed to be 5 years older. Also, Ellie still acts exactly the same. So it really conflicts with what the character's supposed to be portrayed as here.
I'm gonna be a dad. Yeah.
Like most people, I liked the first season. I thought they did a great job. Season 2, I was skeptical on them not recasting Ellie and keeping Bella Ramsey as Ellie because it's supposed to take place 5 years into the future, but obviously Bella Ramsey in real life was not going to age that much in, the 2 years it took between seasons because Ellie still looks and acts like a 14-year-old from season 1, even though she's supposed to be 19. Where Ellie just doesn't feel like she's changed. She still feels like that same kid from season 1 who's just constantly joking and extremely immature. In the game, Ellie has a lot more grit. Ellie is also smart in the game. For some reason, they made the decision for The Last of Us Season 2 to make Ellie dumb, to the point where she even says that she's stupid. Why? That just kind of betrays the character. Yeah, she's supposed to be, reckless and everything, but that doesn't mean that she's some, lobotomite. Feels like the actual main character of Season 2, whereas Ellie just feels like the quirky sidekick constantly scrambling to make a quip. That it's all Bella Ramsey's acting's fault here for the lackluster season. And I don't really agree with that. I don't think this material would work even if they did recast Ellie for somebody else that could embody, the grit and the intimidation that Ellie had in the game.
Imagine being HBO, sitting on one of the most critically acclaimed shows in streaming history, and then throwing it all in the trash. That's what the internet thinks just happened. Because if the whispers are true, The Last of Us Season 3 was quietly killed before cameras even rolled. And the scapegoat? Bella Ramsey. That's right. The breakout star of Season 1 is now allegedly the reason the show's future is on life support. From viral fan backlash to execs allegedly walking out of screenings, this isn't just TV drama. It's full-on industry chaos. And the most shocking part? HBO might not deny it. The unthinkable has happened. After months of anticipation, whispers, and speculation, multiple insiders are now claiming that The Last of Us Season 3 has been quietly axed behind the scenes. And the reason? Allegedly, Bella Ramsey's performance in Season 2. Yes, you heard that right. The very actor who carried the emotional weight of Ellie in the first season, whose chemistry with Pedro Pascal earned widespread acclaim, is now reportedly the reason HBO's biggest prestige series might not return. It's a bombshell that sent shockwaves through the fandom and industry alike. This isn't some mid-tier streaming drama we're talking about. This is HBO's crown jewel, their next Game of Thrones, a certified award magnet with critical acclaim and record-breaking viewership. And yet, gone? Just like that? What went wrong? How does a series this beloved, this profitable, end up on the chopping block? And why is Bella Ramsey, once hailed as the breakout star, now allegedly being named as the creative stumbling block for the entire franchise? What really happened behind the scenes of Season 2 that soured HBO's golden child? To understand just how shocking this fallout is, we need to rewind. Season 1 of Last of Us wasn't just a hit. It was a cultural event. Critics lauded it as one of the best video game adaptations ever made. The performances? Near flawless. Pedro Pascal brought depth and trauma to Joel. But it was Bella Ramsey, the unassuming Game of Thrones alum, who stunned audiences. Their portrayal of Ellie was raw, vulnerable, and fierce. Bella wasn't just playing Ellie. To many, they became her. So when HBO announced that Season 2 was moving forward and Bella Ramsey would return as Ellie, fans were thrilled, but also a little apprehensive. The second chapter of The Last of Us takes a massive time jump. Ellie isn't a 14-year-old anymore. She's 19, older, colder, hardened by loss, grief, and vengeance. In the game, this version of Ellie is physically more mature, emotionally distant, and in many ways, unrecognizable compared to the snarky kid from the first story. But when the first clips from Season 2 started to drop, fans were confused, then concerned. Something fell off. Ellie, now 5 years older in the story, looked almost exactly the same. Bella's voice, mannerisms, and body language hadn't shifted. The transformation just wasn't there. Where was the evolution? How had 5 years of trauma changed Ellie? Because on screen, it hadn't. The disconnect was jarring. Fans flooded social media with side-by-side comparisons from a game. Why does she still look 14? Where's the intensity Ellie's supposed to have? Some defended Bella's performance, blaming the writing or makeup. Others went further, accusing the casting choice itself of backfiring now that the role demanded a darker, more physically imposing version of Ellie. And suddenly, the flawless illusion of HBO's next masterpiece started to crack. What started as subtle discomfort quickly erupted into a full-blown digital wildfire. Across TikTok, YouTube, Reddit, even in the corners of X, formerly Twitter, fans were sounding the alarm. The phrase "something's off" evolved into "this isn't Ellie." And before long, the word miscast was everywhere. TikTok became ground zero. Influencers and casual fans alike began posting side-by-side comparisons of Bella's performance with Ellie from the video game. Not just in looks, but in voice, tone, physicality. Clips of Ellie screaming in pain, gritting her teeth in rage, or quietly mourning Joel were stacked against Bella's more reserved, understated delivery. The contrast? Stark. People weren't just critiquing, they were emotional. For them, it felt personal. Ellie was sacred, and what they were watching didn't feel like her. YouTube lit the match and threw gasoline. Long-form video essays began a trend with titles like "Why Bella Ramsey Doesn't Work as Older Ellie" and "HBO's Biggest Casting Mistake." Content creators broke down the anatomy of performance: posture, cadence, facial expressions. Some were respectful, others brutal. But the thesis was consistent. Something didn't land. And the emotional core of Season 2 was suffering for it. Then came the deep fakes. AI-generated videos began to circulate, splicing Ashley Johnson's original Ellie voice onto Bella's footage, or digitally replacing Bella with actresses who looked more like the in-game Ellie. Some even used footage from older actresses who fans had originally fan-cast for the role. It was jarring, not because it was real, but because it started to convince people of what could have been. Even if the performances weren't flawless, the optics looked closer to what fans expected. And that perception? It spread like wildfire. Why now? Miscast wasn't just trending. It became a rallying cry. Reddit threads with hundreds of thousands of upvotes dissected every nuance of Bella's performance. Tweets accused HBO of choosing wokeness over accuracy. Others came to Bella's defense, saying the hate was deeply unfair and maybe even biased. But the damage was done. A viral sentiment had taken hold. Season 2 lacked emotional weight, and people were pointing fingers at Bella. The emotional disconnect between Ellie's story and Bella's portrayal became more than just a complaint. It became a movement, a shared, growing discomfort that the character they had loved, mourned, and followed for years no longer felt real. And as the backlash reached critical mass, HBO found itself cornered. What happens when the internet decides your prestige casting is a mistake? By this point, the noise wasn't just online, it was echoing through boardrooms. But beneath the viral backlash and the trending hashtags, there was a quieter, more devastating conversation unfolding. Was this just a case of miscasting, or did Bella Ramsey's performance truly fall short of what the role demanded? Let's be clear, Bella Ramsey is not a bad actor. Far from it. Her work in Game of Thrones as Lady Lyanna Mormont was scene-stealing. She brought fire, grit, and quiet intensity. In interviews, she's articulate, thoughtful, and committed to her craft. She won praise in The Last of Us Season 1. Critics and fans lauded her chemistry with Pedro Pascal. But Season 2 asked something different, something deeper, more brutal, more broken. And that's where the cracks began to show. Because Ellie in The Last of Us Part 2 isn't just older, she's a different person. She's been scarred by trauma, hardened by grief. She's haunted, angry, cold, and on the edge of moral collapse. The game delivered that emotional spiral with breathtaking intensity. Long, agonizing scenes of internal conflict, violent breakdowns, and moments of soul-crushing silence. But in HBO's adaptation, those same scenes felt muted. When Ellie discovers the horrifying truth about Joel's fate, the disbelief, the sorrow, the rage, fans expected devastation. Instead, they got restraint, numbness, silence, and not the kind that says, "I'm breaking internally," but the kind that reads as emotionally absent. The camera would linger on Bella's face, waiting for something, a flicker, a fracture, a fury, but too often there was nothing there. Scenes that should have left viewers breathless, heartbroken, and hollow fell flat. The performance wasn't bad, it just wasn't enough. And for a character like Ellie, that's fatal. Because Ellie isn't a blank slate. She's layered, chaotic, simultaneously vulnerable and terrifying. And when Bella didn't, or couldn't, capture that chaos, audiences felt the weight of it. The disconnect wasn't just visual. It was emotional. Some blamed the writing. Others pointed to direction. But the center of it all stood one unavoidable truth. Bella Ramsey, for all her talent, may not have had the range to carry this version of Ellie. And HBO knew it. As the pressure mounted, and fans demanded answers, an unspoken question began to take root inside the network. What do you do when your lead performance falters, and your franchise depends on her? As the backlash gained traction, HBO's once celebrated adaptation of The Last of Us began to transform from a prestige project into a public relations nightmare. According to multiple insiders, what started as quiet concern quickly erupted into full-blown internal panic. At first, the network brushed off the criticism. They'd weathered internet storms before. Game of Thrones survived the Starbucks Cup, didn't it? But this wasn't a throwaway detail or a minor production mishap. This was their lead character, and the internet wasn't just complaining. It was mobilizing. Executives were allegedly stunned by the speed and scale of the fallout. Reddit threads with thousands of upvotes dissecting every expression on Bella Ramsey's face. YouTube essays comparing her to Ellie from the game, frame by frame. TikToks racking up millions of views mocking her delivery. AI-generated deep fakes replacing Bella with a different actress and going viral. And worse, some of them look better. Inside HBO headquarters, sources claim emergency meetings were called. Conference rooms became war zones. Senior producers, showrunners, and top executives reportedly clashed over how to proceed. Was the backlash temporary, or was it a sign that the adaptation had fundamentally lost its emotional core? The scripts for Season 3 were already in development, but suddenly everything was on the table. Tone, direction, even casting. Multiple drafts were allegedly scrapped after table reads sparked disagreement. Some wanted to double down, to give Bella another shot with deeper material. Others pushed for radical changes, a time jump, a focus shift, or even a quiet recast under the guise of creative reimagining. The tension didn't stop there. Writers reportedly expressed frustration over narrative limitations. Some felt boxed in, torn between staying loyal to the game's devastating plot and trying to write around a performance that wasn't landing. The result? Confusion, creative gridlock. A story that once had clear direction now sat in limbo. Meanwhile, PR teams scrambled behind the scenes. Requests for press appearances by Bella slowed to a halt. Marketing language subtly changed. Less emphasis on Ellie's journey, more on the evolving world. It was a subtle shift, but fans noticed. And the silence from HBO only added fuel to the fire. Because the truth was hard to ignore, HBO was shaken. A network that had once confidently greenlit Season 2 before Season 1 even finished airing was now, allegedly, reconsidering everything. Could they afford to keep going with a lead the audience had turned on? Or would moving forward mean gambling the future of their most expensive series on a performance already deemed unfit by a vocal majority? Whatever the final call would be, one thing was clear. The show was no longer on stable ground. And behind the polished trailers and prestige branding, HBO was scrambling to regain control of a story slipping out of their hands. By the time the internal alarm bells were ringing at HBO, The damage was already spilling into the public metrics, and in Hollywood, numbers talk. First came the Rotten Tomatoes score. Season 1 had been a triumph, a rare certified fresh with sky-high audience ratings to match. But as Season 2 aired and episodes stacked up, the numbers began to slip. Quietly at first, a few more 3-star reviews, a few more disappointed fans. But then came the flood. By episode 3, the audience score was in free fall. Metacritic began showing red, not from critics, but from fans. Thousands of 1-star reviews, some offering thoughtful critiques, others not so much. Across platforms, a coordinated wave of review bombing took hold. Reddit forums posted step-by-step guides on how to flood IMDb with low ratings. TikToks encouraged viewers to hit them where it hurts, not through hateful comments, but through data manipulation. And it worked. Studios can dismiss noise. They can ignore outrage, hashtags, and opinion pieces. But they can't ignore numbers. Ratings drive ad spend. Scores influence awards consideration. Metrics dictate whether a show lives or dies. And suddenly, The Last of Us wasn't just a divisive show. It was a statistical liability. Articles started surfacing. Did The Last of Us lose its spark? The Bella Ramsey controversy that HBO won't acknowledge. The media frenzy fed the algorithm, and the algorithm did what it does best, amplify dissent. YouTubers churned out hour-long video essays. Podcasters debated whether the adaptation had betrayed its source material. Twitter, or rather X, became a battlefield, with hashtag #NotMyEllie trending one week and hashtag Justice for Bella the next. And through it all, the fan energy curdled. What started as disappointment over casting and performance critiques metastasized into targeted harassment. Bella Ramsey's social media accounts were flooded with negativity. Some comments crossed the line, personal attacks, threats, even doxing attempts. Others began targeting the writers, showrunners, even Neil Druckmann himself. The backlash wasn't just about the show anymore. It had become a cultural fault line, splitting fans into warring camps. Those who believed Bella was miscast, and those who believed she was being scapegoated. Every trailer release, every interview, every promotional post was met with hostility from one side or the other. And all of it, the review bombs, the spiraling scores, the toxic tweets, became undeniable data. A mounting pile of evidence that something had gone deeply wrong with the adaptation. To the public, it looked like fandom chaos. But to the executives at HBO and the creatives behind the scenes, it was a terrifying message spelled out in metrics. The audience is leaving. And once you lose them, getting them back, that's the real apocalypse. Just when fans thought the franchise was on the verge of collapse, HBO pulled a shocking plot twist, the kind no one saw coming. Season 3 was officially renewed. The announcement dropped like a lifeline in the chaos. Headlines lit up across the internet. HBO commits to The Last of Us Season 3. On the surface, it looked like a vote of confidence. A power move to quiet the noise and calm the storm. But under the surface, the catch was glaring. Instead of recentering the narrative around Ellie, the press release hinted at a dual protagonist structure. For fans of the game, that phrasing meant one thing and one thing only. Abby was coming. And not just as a new character, but as a co-lead. Or maybe even the main lead. The words passing of the torch weren't said out loud, but they didn't have to be. The subtext was clear. Ellie's screen time would be shared. Her story diluted. Her spotlight dimmed. Some saw it as a bold narrative choice, faithful to the game's controversial second half. Others saw something else entirely, a quiet demotion for Bella Ramsey. An off-ramp, a narrative exit strategy wrapped in prestige storytelling. Because in TV, when a character suddenly has to share the frame, it's often code for a strategic retreat. And given the storm of criticism around Bella's portrayal, fans couldn't help but wonder, was this dual arc really about staying true to the source material? Or was it about shifting attention away from a casting choice that had backfired? HBO may have renewed the show, but it didn't feel like a victory lap. It felt like damage control with a glossy filter. And just like that, Season 3 wasn't just a continuation, it became a referendum. On Bella, on backlash, on whether prestige TV can survive when the fandom turns against its hero. Because now it wasn't just about The Last of Us. It was about who HBO really believed was the future of the franchise. Then came the interview. Bella Ramsey finally spoke, and while she kept it professional, fans couldn't ignore the subtext. She sounded hopeful, yes, grateful even, but there was a distance in her tone, a quiet hesitation that didn't go unnoticed. She admitted she hadn't seen any Season 3 scripts, not even a rough outline. When pressed on whether Ellie's story would continue front and center, she used the phrase "there have been talks," specifically talks about her role being reduced or rebalanced. And that was all fans needed to hear. To many, this wasn't a vague update. It was confirmation. That HBO was pivoting. That behind the scenes, the network was backing away from Bella as Ellie. Not with an announcement, but with silence, redirection, and slow narrative erosion. She didn't sound like the star of a prestige series gearing up for her next big chapter. She sounded like someone waiting to be told what her future even was. So what's the truth here? Is this simply the ugly side of fandom? Fan pressure taken too far, morphing into bullying and corporate panic? Or is it the opposite? A studio playing chess, using the backlash as an excuse to pivot away from a casting choice they regretted but couldn't admit? Did Bella truly fall short of the role? Or is she just the easiest scapegoat in a messy situation? A young actor caught between die-hard fan expectations, sky-high stakes, and a brutal entertainment machine that loves you until it doesn't? What's happening with The Last of Us isn't just a controversy. It's a collision between art and commerce, between fan ownership and creative control, between the fantasy of perfect casting and the very real consequences when that fantasy cracks. Because The Last of Us was never just a game, and it's no longer just a show. It's a battleground now, for legacy, loyalty, and the uncomfortable question everyone's too scared to ask out loud. What happens when the prestige dies, and all that's left is damage control?